All right, so now let's set up our instances for our trees here. We're going to go into the terrain mountain and we're going to create a separate stream here. We're going to use the mask by feature node again. So drop down a height field mask by feature. And we're just going to come off our cache. We've got this really great height field scatter node. And this is going to do everything for us. And that is going to add our rotations that we want. Going to face it all in the up direction as well. And before we let it cook fully here, it's trying to add all these scatter points on the entire mountain here, which we don't want. We haven't set up our mask by feature yet. So I'm going to create 3 different scatter nodes here. And that's going to be an easy way to just plug in 3 different instances to 3 different scatters here. So I'm going to use the mask by feature. Let's go ahead and mask by slope here. I want to use the slope to add trees, but I want to make sure to limit. I want to limit the areas of the top where we're going to see our rocks there. So if we just take a look at our reference, you can see that it's kind of scattered without the main mountain here, but we definitely have some bare spots on the top of the mountain and definitely on the mouth of the volcano. So we can limit it by the slope here. I'm going to also mask by height. Let's compute the range. I'm just going to limit the top height about 270, and let's fade it back a little bit more to about where if we go to our render view, you can see how we got this rock coming down till about here. So I'm going to start just fading off the trees around that area. And that should pretty much do it. So now let's plug in our height field scatter. In the second input, we've got mask or scatter points. Let's plug that in. And let's take a look at our height field scatter. You can see how it's scattered these points up to those areas. First thing I want to do is, in our height field scatter, we've got a lot of different options. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and our max points, the max amount of trees I want to scatter on this node, I'm going to set to 20,000. So limit that quite a bit. We're going to come back to this when we have our instances to look at here. So let's go out of here. And now let's bring in our tree geometry. So let's just bring in a geometry. We're going to call this Rainforest Tree 1. Let's dive in here and navigate in your project files. Navigate to the 3 files where you have your OBJs of the Rainforest Tree 1. So you'll have a twig, a tree, and a leaves summer. What I'm going to do is merge all these files together. So we can view that. And now it's going to be quite large, so I'm going to transform this down to a relatively decent scale. Let's put a transform here. I'm going to transform this down roughly 50 times, so 0.02. Let's look at that. And if we press space F, we're going to frame that selection. So here's our tree. All right. So in our tree here, I'm going to put down a null. And we're going to call this out. Let's view that. So now we have rainforest tree. Let's also drop down an instance node. So in our instance node, we're going to instance this rainforest tree. We can hide that. We're going to instance that on the mountain. And what I forgot to do was name, let's create a null underneath our scatter here. Let's just call this outscatter. All right, so let's go to our instance, and I'm going to bring in an object merge. Let's bring in that scatter under the terrain mountain outscatter. Okay, so we're actually bringing in the entire mountain itself. So let's get rid of that by going back into where we scattered the points. Under the height field scatter, we want to deselect keep incoming terrain. All right, so let's go back to that instance node. So we've object merged this in, we've got these points. Okay, so let's just set this up. So what we just want to do is under the instance, let's go to the instance tab and let's drag our tree onto the instance object. And under point instancing, let's do full point instancing. And there we have it. So now we've got all these instances that are, we can't really see because there's maybe too many of them. So for this, let's go back into the scatter. And whoops, I meant to do 20,000, not 200,000. All right, so now we can see how our instances are scattered. I'm going to show all objects. And now we can play around with the height field scatter node here. So what's nice about this scatter node is we can do everything for the randomization in the scatter node. So I'm going to deselect match normals with terrain. This is going to have them all face up. We can also match the direction of the slope, or deselect that to have them all facing the same angle. But if we just deselect match direction with slope, we can see how they're facing all the same way. So if we just randomize the yaw, we can just randomize those just from that, super easy, and randomize the up, the angle of which they're pointing, really easily. So just from that one node, we've randomized our instances, the angle, and the pivot, just like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the scatter and the outscatter, and we're going to use that for our second tree because we're going to have a total of 3 trees. So the only thing I'm going to do on the height field scatter is change the global seed, and now we can go ahead and essentially duplicate this and we can add these instances. If we go under an instance node, it's starting to get fairly heavy here, so let's go into the instance node here and let's choose that different scatter, the scatter 1. And so from just doing that, we've created 2 different scatter nodes with 2 different seeds with 2 different trees. So in a rainforest tree 2, I'm going to navigate to our file paths for our second tree. So let's navigate to that. And actually, I'm not going to view the instance. Let's hide the other objects. And I'm going to view the out here. And let's just take a look at the tree while we change these here. Let's go to tree 2, obj, let's replace the tree. And on file 3, let's do the same thing. And this is the twig. Okay, so we've replaced this asset just like that. So now we're going to be instancing on this tree on number 2. All right, so lastly, what I want to do with this instance is I just want to randomize the scale. So real quickly, what I'm going to do for that is I'm just going to add an attribute randomize right here. I'm going to use the attribute called pscale. And I've found that I'm just going to use a uniform continuous distribution, but we could also use a blend of 2 values with a probability of each of the different values. So essentially, I'm going to use a value of 0.4 and 0.3 for the trees. So let's just copy that and place in our other instance. All right, so just like that, we've got the pscale set up for our instances. And finally, we're just going to create one more instance of what's going to be our palm trees. So let's hide those and let's select these nodes. And if we just press Alt and drag, we can duplicate those just like that. And our instance 3 is indeed on our new geometry. And maybe palm trees are going to be a little bigger. So in this palm tree, since I know we're going to be instancing the palm tree on this one, maybe I'm just going to increase the pscale of the largest ones to be a little bit bigger. And let's replace the asset of our tree. So in our palm tree here, we just have the one file. Let's just find that in palm tree. We're going to use the palm tree obj. And if we just kind of frame that selection, you'll see here we have our palm tree. All right, so we've got our 3 trees. Let's just set up the final scatter node for that palm tree. So for this, I'm just going to do a new mask to scatter these palm trees. And, you know, maybe I want to use the palm trees. Maybe I want to put them a little bit more in a different area, or maybe a little bit more towards the bottom of the beach. So let's take a look at our mask here. So I'm just going to create a different mask for the palm trees, but you know, fairly similar. Let's compute the range. Make sure they're not at the top. And essentially I want to make sure these are a little bit more on the ground by the beach than the other guys. So if I just reduce the slope a little bit and decrease the slope angle, we can kind of limit where they're going to be on the sharper areas or the steeper areas of the rock. And we're kind of pushing it down, making sure we've got it on the flatter areas and definitely more by the water. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So essentially we're just creating a whole different scatter node just for the palm trees. And it's just kind of really easy to get a good read of what's happening. It's just easy to place it around. So again, I'm going to change the global seed, well, just in case. Let's plug that in. I'm going to keep everything the same, but we're just using a different mask to place that. So let's just go find that. So now I'm just going to view the original out node of our mountain. Okay, and let's just get out of here. Go into our instance 3, and I'm going to grab the outscatter 2, I believe is the newest one. Okay. You can see we got different points. All right, and that's all we need to do.